There we go. And now we're going to do some fresh herbs as well. I really like thyme. And when it's coming from my garden, the stems are so fresh and tender that I can just chop it, stems and all, and put that in. And we'll save the parsley as our final garnish. So I'm just going to put the lid back on for 1 minute to let the peas finish thawing and warming, and then our risotto will be ready to go. All right, our peas should be perfect by now, so we're going to take the lid off again. And in fact, we can turn the burner off now. So our final add-ins are going to be on top for the most part. We've got our parsley. There we go. And we're going to stir in a little bit of butter, and that just adds to the creaminess that is part of what makes risotto so delicious. And it'll melt really, really quickly. I can see the cheese in here. Got that beautiful Parmesan melty stuff going on. And as soon as the butter's stirred in, it's time to plate it. And again, a bowl is ideal for risotto because if it's got that soupy texture, you don't want it running off your plate. Okay, a little bit more cheese on top, more of the bacon bits, parsley, a wedge of lemon, and it's ready to go.
Coming up next is a fun dish that packs all the fabulous flavor of fajitas into an easy-to-prepare casserole. You can make it in one large dish or single-serving size if you prefer. Feel free to add in any vegetables you have on hand to make it a clean-out-the-fridge meal.
I'm Derek Fage, and I encourage you to join me each and every weekday at 2 p.m. for an edition of Daytime Ottawa. We will share with you some fabulous stories, inspirational stories, and of course, recipes from local chefs. We'll tell you about some wonderful musical performances, introduce you to local businesses and charities, and so much more. Join us here on Daytime Ottawa at 2 p.m. weekdays with repeats at 6 and 11 p.m.
Next time on Simply Cooking by Chef,
we're going to be making creme brulee, a risotto with wild-caught salmon, lemon, and fresh herbs, and my favorite mista salad.
Paula Roy's Favorite Foods is made possible with the help of Farm Boy. It's all about the food.
All right, skillet fajitas, so much fun to make and even more fun to eat. So the version I'm going to prepare with you today uses sirloin steak. You could absolutely make this with chicken. It would even be great with pork. You could sub in some black beans instead of meat if you like, but here we go with the steak. So we're going to heat up our pan and add in a little bit of olive oil. And now we're going to cut our steak into thin slivers so they cook quickly. And the sirloin's a great choice because it comes in good sized pieces. And again, this is a dish that would serve 2 people probably as a main course, 4 as party food. And I'm just slicing it into, as I said, thin little pieces so they'll cook quickly. You can pre-cook the meat and continue on with this dish later if that's something that you like to do to speed things up at mealtime.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, bienvenue. We're going to start in about 1 minute. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. I would like to call the meeting to order, and for those who are able, please rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you, merci. As we begin our meeting today, and on behalf of Ottawa City Council, I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence has nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation and honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. I'll ask the Deputy Clerk now to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Luloff,
Je suis présent.
Councillor Dudas, Councillor Hill,
Present.
Councillor Curry, here. Councillor Kelly,
Present.
Councillor Gower,
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh, present. Councillor Johnson, here. Councillor Devine,
Here.
Councillor Bradley, here. Councillor Tierney,
Present.
Councillor Plante, ici. Councillor King,
Here.
Councillor Troster, here. Councillor Leeper,
Here.
Councillor Brockington,
Here.
Councillor Menard,
Here.
Councillor Carr, here. Councillor Kitts, here. Councillor DeRoos, Councillor Brown,
Here.
Councillor DeRoche, Councillor Hubley,
Here.
Councillor Lowe,
Here.
Mayor Sutcliffe,
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes from the council meeting of June 14th. Are the minutes carried? Declarations of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Councillor Johnson?
I, Councillor Lane Johnson, declare a potential deemed indirect pecuniary interest on the following items on the City Council agenda of June 28th, 2023. Item 16.1, applications to alter 233 Argyle Avenue and 330 McLeod Street. Item 16.2, zoning bylaw amendment of 233 Argyle and 330 McLeod. And item 16.3, zoning bylaw amendment 15 and 17 des Oblats Avenue, as my spouse has a financial relationship with the owners of the properties.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Are there any other declarations of interest? All right, I'll note the communications from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and the responses to inquiries. We did receive regrets from Councillor Desroches and from Councillor Dudas, who is not able to join us today because of a death in her family, and our thoughts are with her and our sympathies are with her and her family at this time. Motion to introduce reports. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, that the report from Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc., entitled Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. 2022 Annual Report, Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee Report 5, Environment and Climate Change Committee Report 5, Planning and Housing Committee Report 11, Transportation Committee Report 6, and the reports from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending June 23rd, 2023, and summary of oral and written public submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of June 14th, 2023 be received and considered, and that the report entitled Proposed 2023-2026 Term of Council Priorities be received and tabled.
All right, is the motion carried? Thank you. So let's move through the agenda, the annual meeting of the members of Marché d'Ottawa Markets. We're going to hold that. Item 12 is Hydro Ottawa annual report, and we have a motion to defer this to a later date. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas Hydro Ottawa is incorporated under the Ontario Business Corporations Act, OBCA, and pursuant to the OBCA, is required to hold an annual meeting of its shareholders within 15 months from its last annual meeting, which in the case of Hydro Ottawa occurred at City Council on June 22nd, 2022. And whereas given a potential labor disruption at Hydro Ottawa is requesting Council defer the annual general meeting of Hydro Ottawa and consideration of the annual report to the meeting of City Council scheduled for September 13th, 2023. And whereas the shareholder declaration for Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc., HOHI, requires that members of the boards of directors for HOHI be appointed by the City of Ottawa, and there are currently 4 members of the Board of Directors of Hydro Ottawa whose terms are expiring on June 30th, 2023. Therefore, be it resolved that Council, number 1, defer the annual general meeting of Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. for the year ended December 31st, 2022 to the meeting of City Council scheduled for September 13th, 2023, and 2, approve the recommendation of the Board of Directors of Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc., specifically that Council extend the terms of the persons identified at document 1 enclosed with this motion to serve as members of the Board of Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. for the corresponding terms as specified, and 3, authorize the Mayor and the City Clerk to sign a written resolution on behalf of the City of Ottawa as shareholder of Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc., setting out the resolutions approved by City Council. Document 1 is then there in front of you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Is the motion carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Item 13 is from the City Clerk, status update, council inquiries and motions for the period ending June 23rd, 2023. Is that item received? Item 14, Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee. Item 14.1 is the on-demand accessible taxi cab service study and minor amendments to vehicle for hire bylaw related to taxi cabs. And there is a motion related to that. Did you want to hold that or should we deal with it? Everybody good to deal with that now? Okay, so on the motion, Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning to you and everyone. As we know from our committee meeting, we received the on-demand accessible taxi cab report, and there were a number of amendments related to this bylaw. Staff have stated that the taxi bylaw review will not happen this term of council, as you'll see later on when we deal with the work plan for the bylaws. However, in consultations over the past many months, many stakeholders raised a number of issues with respect to regular taxis, and staff are supportive of moving forward with one change in particular, and that's the motion that we have before us today. Therefore, to get it on the record, I'll read it. Whereas the Municipal Act grants authority to municipalities to set the tariffs of licensed taxi cabs operating in Ottawa, and City Council has exercised that authority through Schedule B of the Vehicle for Hire bylaw that sets out taxi cab tariffs. And whereas the standard or base meter rate for fares departing from the Ottawa McDonald Cartier International Airport is the same for any other location in the city, and whereas the airport fees charged to the standard and accessible taxi cab drivers are currently not passed on to the customer, and whereas such airport fees at other airports in Canada are passed on to the service users or passengers as part of the total bill. Whereas the airport-related fee is set out on a multi-year license agreement between the Ottawa International Airport Authority and Coventry Connections, Inc., as well as the collective agreement between Unifor Local 1688 and Coventry Connections, Inc., with a nominal scheduled annual increase. Therefore, be it resolved that Schedule B of the Vehicle for Hire bylaw 2016-272 as amended be amended to add to item 1 the amount of $5.56 as part of the meter rate for fare pickups at the Ottawa International Airport only, and that would take effect September 1st, 2023. Be it further resolved that Council delegate authority to the Chief License Inspector to amend Schedule B to increase the airport pickup rate annually in accordance with the license agreement between the Ottawa International Airport Authority and Coventry Connections, Inc., and the collective agreement between Unifor Local 1688 and Coventry Connections, Inc., for long as such agreements are in place. And Mayor, I'll just say that in addition to staff support, both the local union and Coventry Connections support this motion before us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Is the motion carried? And then the committee recommendations as amended, are those carried? All right, thank you. Moving to item 14.2, which is the 2023 to 2026 corporate bylaw review work plan. Is that carried? Item 14.3 is the Ottawa Paramedic Service 2021 and 2022 annual report. Is that received? Item 14.4 is the Ottawa Paramedic Service 2024 to 2026 investment plan. Is that carried? Okay. Item 15 is the Environment and Climate Change Committee report. Item 15.1, alternate locate agreements. Is that carried? The committee recommendation carried? Item 15.2 is the Urban Forest Management Plan update. Is that carried? Item 15.3 is a motion on green construction and consumer financing. Is that carried? Item 16 is the Planning and Housing Committee report. Item 16.1, applications to alter 233 Argyle Avenue and 330 McLeod Street. Properties designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Is that carried? Item 16.2, zoning bylaw amendment, 233 Argyle and 330 McLeod Street. Is that carried? Item 16.3, zoning bylaw amendment for 15 and 17 Des Oblats Avenue. Is that carried?
Mayor, if I can just make a quick comment on that.
On 16.3.
Oh, sorry. What's that?
I'll just make a quick comment on it if it's okay.
Yep.
You can hold it or it's quick.
If it's quick, go ahead.
Okay, thanks so much. I wanted to thank staff for their work on this. There was a couple of items that came up committee that I mentioned I'd raise at council that I know staff are going to work on the applicant with. One is around the contribution of affordable housing here. This is a lot of new units coming in to this area, and I think welcome in that regard. but there's not affordable housing attached to this. And so I've asked the applicant to look at a voluntary contribution to affordable housing, which I know they're doing now, and I've written to them. The other piece, Mayor, that I'd like to ask staff to do is to continue negotiating with them around the provision of Presto passes. There's no parking here, and the new tenants that'll be coming into this building will have a Presto pass preloaded, but that's only for a limited timeline for the new entrants. So, and because there'll probably be lots of turnover in this building, I've asked the applicant to extend that for a 5-year timeline so that that modal share can be recognized in a highly important area for transit, for walking, for biking, and for car use. So I'll just leave those comments there, and wanted to thank staff for their work on what is an innovative report. And there's still some work to be done on this, so through site plan. But thanks very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. So again, that motion carried, but I understand Councillor Kelly, you're dissenting on that. Councillor Lualoff dissenting as well. Anyone else?
Councillor Brown, please, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Item 16.4 is zoning bylaw amendment for 211 Armstrong Street. Is that carried? All right, item 17 is the Transportation Committee's report. 17.1, amendments to the use and care of roads by law. And I know there's a motion from Councillor Gower. We can hold that? Yep. Item 17.2 is the permanent always stop control at intersection of Shauna Crescent, Evening Shadow Avenue, and Ashley Cardle Lane. Is that carried?
I'm going to dissent on that, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Devine dissents. Item 17.3, permanent always stop control at intersection of Parkway Road and Black Creek Road. Is that carried?
And dissenting on that one too, please, Mayor.
Okay, dissent from Councillor Devine. Item 17.4, bike share program recommendation and direction. Is that carried? Item 17.5 is the motion from Councillor Troster regarding cycling safety at the Gladstone Avenue and Rochester Avenue intersection. Is that carried? Item 16 is the presentation on the proposed 2023 to 2026 term of council priorities. So we'll hold that for a presentation. Item 19 is the bulk consent agenda. There have been no requests to lift any items. So is the bulk consent agenda carried? Okay. So let's go back to item 11, which is Marché d'Ottawa Markets annual meeting of the members. And we will start with Councillor Menard moving a motion to recess council in order to hold the annual meeting of the members. Councillor Menard.
Thank you, Mayor. That council recess for the purposes of holding the annual meeting of members of the Marché d'Ottawa Markets, and that upon the conclusion of the annual meeting, the meeting of council resume.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Is that carried?
Carried.
Okay. And so I will now turn the microphone over to the chair of Ottawa Markets, Brian Chandler. Whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome to the annual meeting of Ottawa Markets. I would like to call the annual meeting to order and confirm that the notice of this meeting has been properly delivered and quorum of members being present. I declare the meeting to be properly constituted. I would like to move to appoint Mayor Sutcliffe as chair of this meeting. May I have a motion from the floor?
Thank you, Councillor Leeper.
And a seconder.
Someone second that. Councillor Curry, thank you.
All right. All members in favor. I declare the motion to be carried.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do want to thank the chair and thank the members of the board for their hard work leading us to this point. We're going to first deal with some administrative matters. So I would move to pass the following resolutions. Number one, that bylaw number 1 be amended to delete section 5.4 of bylaw number 1 in its entirety and replace it with the following. Directors shall be elected by the members by ordinary resolution at an annual meeting of members at which an election of directors is required. The terms of office of directors shall be up to 3 years or is determined by ordinary resolution of the members, providing to the greatest extent possible for staggered terms for directors to ensure board continuity. Number 2, to recommend to the board for consideration the terms of reference for directors in the form circulated to the directors with the notice of meeting. Number 3, to accept the resignations of Greg Skotnicki, Pamela Bianconi, Marianne Gee, Nicholas Moyer, Dave Donaldson, and Deborah Abbott as directors of the corporation. Number 4, to appoint the following as directors of the corporation for the stated terms: Mayor Sutcliffe for 3 years expiring at the annual meeting in 2026, Court Curry for 3 years expiring at the annual meeting in 2026, Misha Kaplan for 3 years expiring at the annual meeting in 2026, Nina Kressler for 3 years expiring at the annual meeting in 2026, Grace Chin for 3 years expiring at the annual meeting in 2026, and Dominique Labelle for 2 years expiring at the annual meeting in 2025. Number 5, to confirm the continuance of Brian Chandler as a director of the corporation and to extend his term for an additional 3 years expiring at the annual meeting in 2027. Number 6, to set the number of directors at 7. And number 7, to appoint Welch LLP as public accountant to hold office until the next annual meeting of the members. So Councillor Menard, I believe you are moving this motion, seconded by Councillor Kitts. All members in favor? Carried? Any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. And I will now ask Brian Chandler to present the annual report to the meeting. Again, thank you, Brian, for your leadership on this.
All right, thank you very much. Next slide, please. Agenda, quick message, a review of the financials. I'll then have Zach go through some of the highlights from 2022 from our time at Ottawa Markets. And then we'll touch quickly on the transition, which we just accepted to the Byward Market District Authority model. Next slide, please. So this period completes the mandate of the original Marché Ottawa Markets. The original mandate of the organization, as agreed to in 2018, was to secure a diverse and innovative mix of outdoor and indoor tenants, position the markets as a desirable destination that offers programming and shopping for both residents and tourists alike, promoting local foods and goods, while also offering products that suit customer needs, celebrating and building the rich heritage of the area and the market within its community, and establishing a growth-based model that is financially viable and operationally sustainable. We feel that one, we have been very successful in this regard, but are more excited about the transition to the more expanded mandate, which was originally kind of brought up and discussed all the way back in 2013 and 2014 with the PPS reports. We are committed as an organization to this transition to the broader authority, which was discussed at council a couple of weeks ago. I would also like to thank the outgoing board members for their hard work and dedication over the past 5 years. But most of all, I would like to thank our existing staff, most notably our executive director, Zach. This has been a period of transition. There's been a lot of discussion in the public domain about the future of this organization, about what it's going to hold. And they have been able to continue to grow the organization, expand the mandate, and do excellent work all under that uncertainty in that cloud. Next slide, please. The financials for the organization remain in a good position. The financials for the year left us in a net positive position. You can see the continued growth of the outdoor vending in both Byward and Parkdale. This is moved back to kind of pre-pandemic levels. I don't think we're there yet, but we're continuing that solid transition. The continued growth of that outdoor market continues based on the strength of our staff, and I think Parkdale has never been stronger. The leasing at 55 Byward and 70 Clarence is at 100%. And of note, as we'll look on the next page with the cash balance, when we first took over this, the management of these buildings and this entity, a full facilities audit was completed. Significant work has happened on the facility over our term, but we recently completed a new audit as we transition to the authority, of which we're starting to get into now. Next slide, please. You can see we have a strong cash balance that is not all just available cash. A significant chunk of that cash is tied up for the implementation of future projects that have been identified with that deferred capital maintenance. Safety and security continues to be one of the largest expenses, but also one of the biggest issues in the area. There has been a lot of talk lately from the police chief, including yesterday, related to a storefront and a further delegation of police and other services in the market. And we are fully supportive of that and seek to work with the police on the implementation of that plan. Of note is we paid over $230,000 to the city of Ottawa on property taxes for the management of those buildings. And as we transition to the Byward Market District Authority, that has included a download of some various services and various revenue streams from the city, which we have started to operate and work with the city very closely on, and will continue as we transition to a broader governance model. Next slide, please. I'll now transition to Zach as he goes through the highlights.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate the comments, and as well, just want to echo a big thanks to all the staff, volunteers, and community members that help make the public market what it is. Next slide, please. So over the last few years, over the pandemic, we've been working hard to develop and lean into the space of a public market. That is the trend of around the world in terms of these centers that used to perhaps once be farmers markets or food markets only are evolving into larger public spaces. You can see from our website, again, which will transition into a larger district authority page, we've been modernizing the vendor application process. So again, when you arrive at our site, you'll be able to do this process predominantly online, where in the past, believe it or not, within the last 5 years, this was all paper and all very old-fashioned to a certain extent. Next slide, please. As part of that, what you can see are our offerings, but I show this to illustrate how flexible we need to be in the public market space. And one of the larger things that a district authority is going to have to deal with is an aging infrastructure. At the current time, we use a combination of pop-up tents, sort of fabricated structures that are about 20, 25 years old, and special montage pop-ups. Which again, we hope as we move into the district model, we have more flexibility in providing what is set up on site. Next slide, please. And as well, a public market needs to have very clear rules of engagement for public spaces. It is a public market. It's meant for everyone, from, and I think I note this in a later slide, from somebody who's experiencing homelessness and nowhere to go to the king. It should be a place where everybody feels comfortable experiencing and exploring their city. Next slide, please. So over the 5 years, we've been working to establish and grow, as I mentioned and highlighted with the online portal, the public market program at both Byward and Parkdale. The idea here is we want to be an attractive location for vendors, which are small businesses, to set up, explore their concept, and advance their operations. We've made key steps to achieving this mandate. We established a Farmers First policy, as well as we repealed and reintroduced an operating procedure through the City of Ottawa Markets Bylaw. Our Farmers First policy guarantees any farmer who wants to come down to our public markets priority placement and, in some cases, free vending fees to discounted vending fees depending on their operation. We have established a program for events and markets in both Byward and Parkdale, and I highlighted that. You can go online and you can look at where you want to host your activation, and you can see how you can engage with the space. I really can't stress how important this is to moving the operation forward. Again, this is a business model that was predominantly phone calls and written letters before sort of the last 5 years. We've maintained, as Brian noted, 90% or over 90% occupancy in our historic market building, working with our tenants and our prepared food providers to help create a good offering on a consistent basis. As well, we've invested in infrastructure such as accessible washrooms, enhanced security and cleaning measures. Those are all things that have happened over the last 5 years. And I will highlight, we maintain one of the only public washrooms in the Byward market area, which is incredibly important, and that comes at a cost to the not-for-profit entity. As well, the Rideau Centre does offer washrooms as well. It's important so that people know where those are. And as well, we've recently transitioned to in-house property management. Over the last 5 years, we've been taking the time to learn the practice, learn the business, and then we've brought it in-house to make it fit and adapt more with the use of community benefit and public needs. Next slide, please. Vending. Vending is the all-important component of our public market program. In 2022, our vendor program had over 300 vendor applications, and half were licensed. We obviously don't license everyone based on a variety of factors and features. Again, those numbers are low, and they need to grow over the number of years or the years ahead, which is why we've been working to modernize our application process. We have this whimsical dream that you should be able to wake up in BC and book a summer's worth of incubation for your business by traveling across to public markets. And we should be part of that network where you can come to Ottawa, you can test your product. It's good for everybody. It's good for visitors. It's good for tourism. We have a very successful night market program, more so in Wellington West with the Parkdale Night Market. Can't thank the community enough. We've launched this program in Byward and are starting to see it grow with some unique offerings on William Street, which we maintain as a pedestrian location. As well, and I know that the conversation about farmers and produce comes up quite a bit in conversations. Our mandate is to provide access to good quality produce for individuals within the market 7 days a week. And we do that. We do that through a wholesale program, which is Ontario and Canadian product only. That's for sale. One of the things that's very important when we talk about farmers and that business is we have to keep in mind access to a farmer's market isn't always the most accessible thing for communities when you look at the pricing of those products and how you get them and what goes into it. So through our wholesale program, we aim to keep those prices low and we aim to make sure that is available on the market 7 days a week. It is a challenge though, for sure. I'm also really quite happy next slide, please, to highlight that we've hosted over 50 free community events at both Byward and Parkdale. Free community events is an essential component to establishing a public market space. Free seating is something that we do on William Street, and a family who's maybe just arrived in Ottawa or a family going through hardships and just wants a place to be around people. These spaces are important to that. You can see we're highlighting here Cara Vibe, Summer Solstice, Indigenous Festival, Latin Fest, the Mike City Sounds, Pride Market, Vegan Who Snack. You can see them there, a few examples. Again, working with these organizers, we often can create a really fun, free to access space that provides a variety of different cultural exposure points for people in their communities. And we're seeing a lot of really great interest in events being organized by the various communities within Ottawa. And so I thank them for their interest in coming to both Byward and Parkdale. Next slide. As well, just really want to highlight, it was pretty neat to have the future king, or King Charles, come to the area in the only public visit on that tour. Highlights the importance of Byward in terms of the history that it has to this city and how we need to build that into our planning. We welcome back Winterlude, which was something that had sort of been on pause in the area, and working with Canadian Heritage in the BIA, we were able to deploy a really fun evening program. Hopefully next year the weather will cooperate a little bit more. We also repurposed the second floor of the Heritage Building into a free gallery, Gallery 55. That's there for community shows. Right now, I'd encourage everybody to check it out. We have all the most known or unknown graffiti artists in the city who came together with House of Paint to do a really fun display on our boards up there. So I'd encourage you to come and check it out. And then as well, we're beginning to transition to the management of the plazas as a district authority, taking on the Ottawa letters this year for the illumination program and doing a little bit more programming there. And I'm excited to say that we've also launched our own Gateway Information Program, which aims to cover off a former program the BIA had, and ours, which partnered with Ontario Made to highlight that great product. Next slide. Again, I would be remiss to not mention Parkdale. Parkdale gets its own slide here. It's a wonderful public market in the West End. We've been able to do some really great events and activations there, and I come with a big thank you to the city, which will be supporting the 100th anniversary of Parkdale with a $100,000 contribution that will work with the councillor, the community association, and the BIA to put together a program that will be a programming piece, an infrastructure piece, and a legacy piece to celebrate that market's anniversary next year. Next slide. And I'll conclude by saying Ottawa Markets, soon to be the amalgamation of both the BIA and Ottawa Markets as the Byward District Authority, is a founding member of the Market Cities Network. This is a network of public markets around the world that meet and share information on how the management and operations of these spaces are happening. They're critical to every city, and this is a key space that we want to step into. And so if you're looking at this, and if you've been to Byward, and if you've been to Parkdale, the future really is bright. The movement into a district authority is going to provide a lot of great opportunities to manage the public space in a fun and inviting way. But it's also going to create hopefully some more importance for folks as we are achieving one of the core recommendations of where this all started in 2013 with the Projects for Public Spaces report. So thank you for your time, and I'll pass it back to Brian.
Next slide, please. So for our last slide, we're just talking about the expanded operations. The expanded operations truly allows us to do more as a heritage district, to be a true advocate and central authority, enhancing the resident and visitor experience through better integrated public realm management, public markets, better animation, branding, and pageantry, and providing a single source and single location for people to go to in the Byward Market, and undertaking initiatives to help improve community safety and well-being. We are truly looking forward to working with all the partners and stakeholders in the area to provide a better market experience. Next slide, please. So that concludes our presentation. I will pass it back to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian and Zach, for that presentation. Much appreciated. Are there questions? Okay. Conseillère Plante, go ahead.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Merci aussi à Zach et Brian pour la présentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Brian and Zach.
Obviously, the market is very special to me. It's where I had my first job when I first moved to Ottawa. I worked at the Cabin, if any of you remember that place. So I had a couple questions. Some of them came from residents yesterday, and it won't take too much time, I hope. So I was just wondering, you mentioned that you have private security in the market. Like, has that cost stabilized? Is it increasing?
Yes, it is increasing. I would say it's increasing at an unsustainable rate.
Right.
One of the key things for the next board will be to consider how we address that in a more sustainable way, whether that's taking it in, adjusting our service, or expanding it in terms of putting it out there to businesses to participate in the program.
And do you have private security at Parkdale or just in Byward?
We are having to explore applying it at Parkdale as well.
Can I ask why?
Thefts and break-ins.
Okay. Is the district authority covered by the city's conflict of interest policy?
The original mandate included a requirement to create a code of conduct, which included a conflict of interest policy for the organization. There is a 3-page draft of conflict of interest policy, and that will be a requirement of all the directors to review that and sign that. It includes the requirement of directors, if they have a perceived or real conflict of interest, to recuse themselves. It also gives the board the authority to ask members to recuse themselves if they don't do it individually.
So just to put that in perspective, if someone, for example, has a business on York Street and then there's something happening or a decision to be made about York Street, does that person have to recuse themselves from that vote? Is that how that would work?
Yes, or if other board members felt that they could have a perceived conflict of interest in the making of that decision, then we would ask them to leave the room for that decision as well. So that is included in the code of conduct policy, and I'm happy to share that with you if you would like. Well, you will actually get access to that as you become an observer of the board.
Wonderful. I was wondering if you could address just quickly to some of the pedestrianization efforts you've had in the Byward Market over the last year, especially coming out of COVID.
Yeah, so Thank you for the question. In around 55 Byward, we close a segment, we'll call it segment 2 of William Street, and we install seating for pedestrians there, which closes that piece. From time to time, we work with the Event Central, whether it's events under 500 or events over 500, to close down streets on a temporary basis. And then this year, we've not closed any additional streets less Byward Market Square North, where Zach's Waddell are. And that was at the request of all of those businesses. So I know it's something that your office is very keen on, and we're excited to move forward in the coming years to put together a more consistent pedestrianization plan, which can have some flexibility into the evenings for a number of those businesses as well.
We don't just have to do the evenings, Zach. We can pedestrianize all day. So why is the Byward Market not mentioned explicitly in the District Authority mission statement, but the Parkdale Market is?
The reference to the public market does come up several times in the mandate. Parkdale has the new name as the Byward Market District Authority. We felt that the inclusion of Parkdale specifically mentioned by name was very important to understand that it is a component of Ottawa Markets. It is a component of this organization. And it's almost a victim of its own success, where it has been so elegantly and well run that it's just kind of managing on its own, but it is still part of the organization. There are components of the mandate which specifically include the public markets. And that is something that is really near and dear to what the organization will be. It's the name of the organization, and it is a central core of what we're doing. I think you'll see through the strategic plan, it'll take those kind of high-level mandate pieces that talk about the importance of the public market, and will actually manifest certain action items related to how we attract farmers and vendors and make an outdoor market that's available and accessible for all.
Okay. And then my last question is, you mentioned an in-house property management. Are you working with the city on that? I'm confused because we did have a meeting about 3 months ago with the leadership table, and a lot of the vendors and restaurants and bars came, and we heard a very comprehensive plan from the city about cleanliness in the Byward. So I was wondering if you could reconcile what you said and then what we discussed at that meeting.
Yeah, there are a couple of tiers of responsibility for the property management, the exterior, interior, and then there's the whole mechanical piece of both 55 and 70. So we work with the city streets teams to help keep the area clean. I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to apologize to Bryden and their teams, but there are dedicated cleaning teams in the market at the current time, and this is something that's new that we're working with the city to do, and that includes things from flushing sort of alcoves to street sweeping to the bin patrol teams, which are back, which again is really great to see them there. The in-house property management that we run is more the management of the tenants and their leases within the building and our requirements through the service agreement. So that's the public washrooms, that's the cleanliness of the building. The other day we painted all the doors, and that's wild how much of an improvement that made to the space. So that's our level. And then as well, through the service agreement negotiation process, we'll be establishing what those specific thresholds are for the larger district authority. But we've heard very clearly from businesses, tenants, vendors, that an increased standard of care to the sidewalks, to the roadways is required. And we just need to identify how we gain the revenue to do that and to execute it. But I will say the city and their teams have been very responsive to coming out and helping us out with that. So I really do need to stress that. They work quite hard.
I agree. You did very quickly mention the public bathroom that's available at 55 Byward. To your knowledge, is that the only available public bathroom that you guys provide in the Byward Market? Because that's probably the number one question I get from toddlers to seniors to everyone, is the access to public bathrooms in the market.
Yes. So it is, to our knowledge, less the Rideau Center. There is access there. But the Heritage Building is sort of just that landmark. So everybody, all the bus tours come through and utilize that washroom. It is something that we're putting together a refurbishment plan actually right now, just based on wear and tear. You'd be surprised what the wear and tear on the plumbing for that facility actually is. We probably have a plumber coming in once or twice a week, just dealing with pipes from those washrooms.
No more questions. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Conseillère Plante. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you,
very much.
Councillor Plante.
Thank you very much, both of you, for the great work that you continue to do. The Parkdale Market is obviously a huge enhancement in Hintonburg and Wellington West, and we're in good hands with the Ottawa markets in terms of seeing an increasing amount of programming. I did, and I apologize if we were sent these figures before. Can I just ask that the financials be put back up briefly? Am I wrong in seeing that the Parkdale market had greater outdoor revenue last year than did the Byward market space?
That's correct. Parkdale performed better than Byward. Yeah.
There's a 2-year reporting in the financials we've been given, say over a 5-year basis. Have we previously seen Parkdale outperform Byward?
No. So Parkdale and Byward were pretty consistent revenue numbers pre-pandemic, right? Pandemic hit, and Byward took a much more of a hit than Parkdale. And I think it's just the size of the space. We were able to build back a program at Parkdale from online sales, vendor setups, to having the park there, and it's a much tighter space. It made it a little bit more attractive, we think, for customers and vendors. The other thing to really highlight, I think also somewhat of the undertold story is you have to look at the household incomes in and around the Wellington West Parkdale area versus the household incomes in and around the Byward and Parkdale, or in and around the Byward market. Last I checked, I think it's 25% lower than anywhere else in the city at about $45,000, $50,000 income. So that really is where you can sort of draw that line. Folks were coming out less in and around the Byward area. Maybe they were going out exploring the city more. And then I'm always hesitant to highlight this, but the perceived and actual concerns about safety really do have a brand tarnishment for that area and how people are feeling about going out and participating in their public markets.
Okay. And then thank you very much for pulling the figures up, because I was looking for the expenses. So Parkdale Market, I mean, it's significantly cheaper to operate for the revenue. So that's interesting to see. You are proposing that there be a $100,000 capital contribution to public realm improvement at the Parkdale Market to celebrate the 100th anniversary next year. And that's great. And I hope as we move forward that investment maybe isn't directly tied to profit in a one-to-one way. I believe that the moves that we're making with respect to a district authority are necessary to bring back the Byward market as a larger tourist area, as a gathering place for all Ottawa residents. But I hope the Parkdale market will continue to see investment commensurate with the profits that it creates.
Yeah, I think the goal for us, what you'll see in particular, is starting to give Parkdale its own full identity, really stepping into that space. And it's still part of the markets program, our heritage markets, but really working in that area to not carve it out, but better define it as its own space. One thing I'd also just like to highlight really quickly is on the farming piece. That's a real challenge. And I know, Councillor, that you've brought that up in the past. I'd encourage all councillors to take a look at a report that was just issued, or a study that was just issued, written about in the CBC. This is a big issue, right? Food security, where we're going with all these things. Canada lost the equivalent of 7 small farms a day over the last 20 years. Right. So it's a significant amount that we're losing in agriculture and with our product. So places like Parkdale and like Byward are going to become more and more important to provide a space for individuals to provide, well-priced, accessible produce. So thanks for the question.
Okay. And then, sorry, my final question. Can you remind me when the Pride Market is, and is it accurate to say that is a must-attend event at the Parkdale Market?
It is a must-attend event. It is Saturday, August 20th, between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. It is a very wonderful event in Parkdale. I'd encourage everybody to check it out. It's one of the few family oriented activities over Pride, which we got a lot of feedback about, which was great. And can't thank our partner on that, Little Joe Berries, enough, who operates out of the area. And that's been a great partnership.
Thank you for that factual and important information.
Thank you for bringing that clarity, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Troster?
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you so much for being here. I worked for many years in the market on Clarence Street. I love the pedestrianization of William. I love Parkdale Market. I live kind of between the two markets. We've heard a lot, though, about the difficulty in attracting farmers and food vendors to the byword. And from what I could tell, my understanding is a lot of farmers are enjoying the sort of once a week rotational markets that mean they don't have to maintain a stall the whole time. But as a result, we've seen almost a complete emptying out of food vendors in the byword. And I'm just wondering if you have a plan to try to bring some of those folks back, because I'm seeing a lot of crafts, a lot of art, not a lot of food.
Yeah, great question. One of the things, before I sort of dive into this, that I think is really important, a vendor, whether that be a farmer or a wholesaler or an artisan, are small businesses. You know, they margins, how they operate their product, these are things that are going through their mind. And so the single day farmers markets that have popped up around the city, I think at this point there's potentially 22 of them, are beloved by their neighborhoods, and are a good business model for a lot of those vendors, right? They can see sales of $3,500 to $4,500 over the few hours that they're there. And then they go back, produce their product, and come back. Right now in Byward and under the current, I guess the former current mandate of our organization, we were a 7-day-a-week operation for farm produce and product. And that's something in the next phase that we're going to be looking at more specifically. Can we bring in some of these operators to do their single-day farmer market in Byward? That's not to say we haven't tried to have those conversations, but I think we now have a little bit more flexibility as the operating procedures and the legislation that we're putting through here allows us to do. For example, previously we were very limited on bringing food trucks in or food trucks at all. That's now something that we have the flexibility to work with and deploy in the area. Byward is a bit more difficult from a business perspective, bricks and mortar, because we need to balance the interests of those who are paying to be in a bricks and mortar location versus our discounted rates for outdoor vending. And that's where that real sort of strategic look at where do we place people, how does that work, what do those structures actually look like. So I'm very optimistic that over the next year plus, you're going to start to see a very focused recruitment campaign on bringing prepared foods back to the area, bringing produce back in that one-day pop-up space if we can. But at the end of the day, we need to invest in some of those safety pieces, some of those infrastructure pieces in Byward, so that we can be competitive for vendors.
It's great. Thank you so much. And the other thing I'll just say is a number of food security organizations in our city, including the Parkdale Food Center and the Centertown Food Cupboard in my neighborhood, are moving to more of a market or a grocery style model where people have points and they can come shop using those points just like everyone else. And we also know the Mission Food Truck is frequently seen in our neighborhoods. So it would be really great, given the socioeconomic makeup of folks living in the market, to see if there's some way to incorporate that model into the Byward so that everybody can afford to shop in the Byward and it can help bring that community together.
Wonderful recommendation. The two things that I just highlight there that I was remiss to say, we started a program in Byward with Chef Rick where we give out free meals once a month on the plaza. That's for everyone. We want everybody to come and have a meal and be in the public space. And then at Parkdale, I believe it was last year, our market manager and worked with their team. And we did market vouchers and folks were able to go and purchase product with those. So those ideas are happening around the world and are very interesting and appealing to us. So open to any groups listening, please give us a call. We'd love to work with you.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Building on Councillor Troster's questions about the declining number of farmers that set up a stall in the market, One of the things that I've heard, and this may be your opportunity to kind of quash this rumor, is that despite your policies despite your Farmers First policy, there's a lot of resellers that kind of push out the local farmers, the actual quote unquote farmers. Is there some sort of vetting process within that policy to kind of ensure that the farmers that attend the market are actually actual farmers?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to that. So 3 years ago, when I 3-4 years ago started working with Ottawa markets, one of the major things for us was the operating procedure of the market, which is the repeal of the former bylaw and the introduction of our operating procedure. Within that, we wrote into it that no imported produce could be sold on the market. So what do we mean by that is everybody references the byword pineapples or the byword bananas. That is not something that can be sold on the market under our program. It is Ontario produce, absolutely, and then Canadian-wide product. Why did we do that? I'm going to go back to, farmers markets have evolved as businesses. Businesses exist to make money. Farmers are not there for you to feel good. They're there to make money and to provide you with good food. And they will do that where they can make the most amount of money for their product. So our intention with the wholesale program was to continue to be able to provide produce at an affordable rate 7 days a week, as our mandate indicated. So we adjusted and tried to target the concerns of people showing up with crates of product that they've picked up from, a depot from coming in from Mexico. Still product is coming in from a depot. I mean, that's how your grocery stores and a lot of places get their product, but it is Ontario and Canadian. And then the other piece that I would add to that is, I think there's a place for both to coexist. I mentioned that family, or individual who might have a lower income, sure, they can walk through the market and have a great experience, but they can't afford that small bin of, 4 tomatoes for $8, $9. But they can afford to buy a few tomatoes at a lower price that are still Ontario products. So it's about balancing access to food. And I think there's two components to operating a farmer's market. There's the farmer's market for the experience, but then there's the farmer's market from a food access and food security standpoint. And I think both need to coexist, but we're not in that space yet, I think, in Ottawa. That's where our work has to go. And to align it in the Ontario context, I mentioned the 7 small day farms. Ontario, between 2001 and 2021, lost 700,000 hectares of farmland, or comparable to 1.7 million acres. So it's a depleting stock, and those food depots are becoming more and more important to get product to market.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I think my question logically follows the line of questioning from Councillor Chaucer and Councillor Lowe. You've spoken a lot about, we talked a lot about local producers, local product, and the importance of that. And I personally feel like, you talked just now about food access and food security. We're not quite there yet. I think it's a big concern, the situation that we find ourselves in. And I always think, next pandemic, if they don't just shut the border down to travelers and they shut it down to commercial enterprises, we at any time only have a 2-day supply of food in our country. And I don't think people realize how dire the situation is. And so my question to you, you're looking at promoting local food. You've talked about the loss of farms. We've seen some real successes in this country based on provincial investment. For example, Quebec's reached 50% self-sufficiency for fruits and vegetables based on their provincial investment in greenhouses. What can we do? What are your suggestions for what we can do as City of Ottawa, as councillors, to improve local food strategy promotion in order to help have a greater variety of local food vendors and local produce for the markets and elsewhere?
Thank you. Someone like me loves a question like that. There's a lot we can explore. I would say really 3 things. One, as a city, I think we're taking the right steps in terms of the district authority creating spaces for pop-up markets. You know, these single-day markets are beloved by their neighborhoods. I think locally we have a lot of work to do, and perhaps we can help do this in coordinating the networks of markets, you know, coordinating the promotion, making sure people are aware of where all of these markets are, how to access food, and the tradition of our grand markets of Byward and Parkdale and how they relate. The second point there is, you know, I think, and dare I say, it is a question for our provincial representatives around that table. As I said, you know, Ontario is losing 1.7 million acres of farmland in the face of, you know, the Greenbelt project that's going on. I think your assessment or your concern about what's going to happen to food security in the next pandemic is very real. If we have a heat dome that parks itself over Ontario, we could see some dramatic economic impacts related to that. The third thing that I would say is I think, you know, whether it's at the city level, provincial level, or the federal level, I think taking food security a little bit more seriously in terms of what does that actually mean? What is the cost of food? You know, we hear today on the news, there's not enough competition in the grocery market, but yet we're struggling to sort of compete with these larger groups. So I think, you know, every city, every province and most MPs really frankly should be building food in to their conversations the same way that we built the environment in over the last number of years.
Thank you for that. And to me, it's truly terrifying that we have 1 in 7 people in Ottawa who require access to who experience food insecurity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. So there being no further questions, I will now call for a motion to adjourn the meeting, which is moved by Councillor Menard and seconded by Councillor Kitts. Is the motion carried? Thank you, everyone. Thank you again to Brian and Zach and everyone on the team. Merci beaucoup. So let's move to item 17 on the agenda, which is the Transportation Committee report. Item 17.1, amendments to the use and care of roads bylaw. And Councillor Gower, I believe you have a motion on that. Thank you.
I do. Thank you. And this is seconded by Councillor Leeper. Thank you, Councillor. Therefore, be it resolved that the line, a free library box will only be permitted within the right-of-way along a roadway classified as a local road, in Table 3 in the staff report be revised as follows. A free library box will only be permitted within the right-of-way along a roadway classified as a local road or collector road, or on a roadway classified as an arterial road on a side that includes a sidewalk.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Did you want to speak to that at all, or you're?
I did circulate an email yesterday to council. I think, in my view, we need to be as permissive as possible when it comes to little free libraries. And if we were to limit these to local roads, it would eliminate the possibility on many, many roads in my community, and I'm sure many others, where there are existing libraries located.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to thank the committee for their good work. I know last week it was a long meeting, and I'm happy to see some movement on this matter. And I want to speak on a few items that I know others have heard from various stakeholders around the city. And they focus on 3 main issues. One is the height restriction of plants or foliage that can be grown on the right of way, raised beds, the ability for people to have raised beds, and the actual production or growing of food within the right-of-way lands. And I'll take those in reverse order. So my understanding is staff have agreed to report back to the committee with respect to the matter of growing food on the right-of-way by Q2 of 2024, based on information from Public Health Ontario and perhaps others. People are concerned who have been growing beans and other sort of low height vegetables on right of way that the bylaw officer will show up tomorrow and start plucking vegetables that have been planted. Can staff comment on what the intent will be once this is passed today for people who do plant in the bylaw very low height type of food in particular, what the outcome will be in this regard.
Through the mayor, with respect to the councillor's question, enforcement with respect to this bylaw amendments that are proposed would be, as with others, it would be on a reactive basis only, not on a proactive one.
I just want to emphasize the concern that exists out there. We just heard about, and we're all aware of the challenges that many of our residents are facing with respect to the cost of food, food insecurity. We're trying to promote community gardens. We're trying to promote people to grow within their own property. And this is definitely something that we have to tackle. And my strong request of bylaws, particularly when people are growing food on their own property, to take as much care as possible when they are addressing or reacting to public complaints, which I hope will be as few as possible. The other item are raised beds. And again, I acknowledge that the committee approved that all hard landscaping be prohibited in the right of way. But in my discussions with staff, and again, emphasizing that there's strong interest in raised beds, have agreed on a direction to staff. And if there's any discussion needed, of course, staff are here to answer to that. And my direction to staff on this matter is simply that staff be directed to review the matter of allowing planter boxes on the right of way as part of its report back on the growing of food on the right of way before the end of Q2 2024. So this does not close the door on raised beds. It allows staff to look at options and perhaps best practices and incorporate that back in the report at the end of Q2 of 2024. So I have direction there on that, Mayor. And the last thing that I wanted to raise is regarding the height restrictions. Committee approved a limit of 75 centimeters on any plants grown in the right of way. And I'm sure, colleagues, you've received communication from various stakeholders that talks about other municipalities, Calgary, Halifax, Mississauga, Oakville, Regina, Saskatoon, St. Catharines, Vancouver, North Vancouver, Winnipeg, all allow plants of 1 meter in height. And then other municipalities, it's either 80 centimeters or 90, Guelph, London, Sarnia, Toronto, Whitby, and Windsor. And again, local advocates are saying we should be at least 1 meter as well. The 25 centimeter difference is negligible in this regard. Neighboring cities have safely and successfully permitted boulevard plantings of up to 1 meter in height for years. Instead of correlating plant height regulations with actual health and safety standards, 75 centimeters is imposed for convenience of aligning the fence and boulevard garden bylaws. So I believe that there's a motion in this regard from my colleague, Councillor Menard. I will just close by saying I do support the overall intent of what's coming out of committee. We definitely had to take and make some improvements with respect to what is planted and grown within the right of way. But as we've heard from local stakeholders and advocates, there is room for improvement here. And on plant height, I'll yield to Councillor Menard to speak to that matter. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I just I wanted to, before I get into the height piece, which I'll put a motion on the floor, but I wanted to talk about edible trees and the Trees and Trust program. Right now, I understand we just offer service berry, and there's a request out there to offer more types of edible trees as part of the Trees in Trust program, more fruit trees, that sort of thing. So can I just ask that staff review that matter and come back with something regarding the Trees in Trust program that would allow for more fruit trees as part of the Trees in Trust program?
Mr. Mayor, through the chair, Mayor, staff have no concerns with taking that direction to come back and review the consideration for edible trees.
Thank you very much for that. That's really appreciated. I'm glad that you're not going to rip out my pear trees that I've got in the front of my place now. And I'll bring pears for everyone on council when they're ready. With regard to the the total height limit, I'll put the motion on the table now, Mayor. I think this would be something that would harmonize with other cities across the country, and would like to just consider it as part of this discussion. So I can avoid some of the whereas clauses and just read the therefore be it resolved. It's that the height restrictions for planting in the right of way be imposed at 1 meter rather than 0.75 meters, aside from visibility triangles, which were mentioned by staff, and as already otherwise specified around city infrastructure like hydrants, hydro poles, and bus stops. This would harmonize ourselves with many other cities that already do this, that don't have those safety concerns, and is a good practice when it comes to things like plants with more height, which have a greater root depth, sequester more carbon, better filter stormwater, and of course, people have been doing this anyway. So the fact of the matter is we're already doing this. We're just not enforcing it, and it's been a good practice. So I'll put that on the table and appreciate staff's good work on this. One point of clarification, I think a lot of residents feel like we're being more restrictive, or the media's been talking about more restrictive. We're actually being less restrictive. We're just updating our bylaws with this. So I want to thank staff for their good work on this. It's been a lot of work, I know, and you've had a lot of feedback come in, but there's a lot of good coming out of this. And I know when OPH comes back with more information too around plantings, I hope that we see more permissibility here. So thank you. Thanks to staff.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Is there a partridge in your pear tree? I'm just wondering. Just curious.
Not right now, but okay. Maybe Christmas
maybe
time.
Around. Excellent. Councillor Leeper?
Thank you, Mayor. That's going to be stuck in my head all day now. Stop. So colleagues, obviously, I am seeking a bylaw that's going to be as permissive as possible, but still gets the large buy-in from everyone around the table. So I'll be happy to support Councillor Menard's motion. I'm speaking at this moment just to specifically ask that you support Councillor Gower's motion with broadening the number of streets on which little free libraries can go. Kitchissippi Ward is characterized by an arterial road every few blocks. Churchill, Kirkwood, Parkdale, obviously are heavily traveled pedestrian streets and very residential in character. You take a look at Sherwood, Gladstone, clearly these are streets on which I believe we should be able to put little free libraries. So I do hope that colleagues will support that motion by Councillor Gower. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Similarly, I do want to speak in support of Councillor Gower's motion because sometimes when I get bored, I go around the ward by foot or by bus or by car. And a lot of these little libraries are on collector streets. And by restricting to only local roads, we would actually there is the potential to lose a number of these local libraries, and they are valuable assets in the community. Anyway, that point aside, I do have a question for staff about the Brockington direction. If we were to allow, there are legislated rights for utilities to access our rights of way to get to their right of ways to get to their assets. If we were to allow planter boxes, would that hinder that? And what sort of implications are there for the municipality if we deny them or hinder those legislated rights?
Mr. Mayor, you have to forgive me. Could I ask the councillor to repeat the question? I missed the last portion of that.
So utilities have legislated rights to access their their assets in our right of way. By allowing planter boxes, or even, I feel like it might hinder that access. So are there any implications for the city in hindering that legislated right of access?
Through the mayor, certainly whenever the city provides permission for anything to go within the right of way above ground, there is a risk that we are hindering either our contractual obligations or the legislative rights of utilities who have access to that below ground.
Okay, thank you. That's actually it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate the amendments or the motions that have been put forward. We're moving in the right direction. I'd like to think that Ottawa is getting more permissive on growing things and encouraging pollinator gardens and hopefully food growing as well. I'd like to know what the plan is from city staff on actually promoting to encourage these things. We know we need more pollinator gardens. We need more variety of, and grass just doesn't do it. So this is going in the right direction for just climate change overall. What kind of plans do we have for communication of that?
Through the mayor, certainly depending on what happens today and in relation to council putting forward the regulations, once we get the bylaw in place, the real work moves to implementation, as you mentioned, Councillor, and that'll be developing a website and utilizing all the communication tools at our disposal, whether it be Twitter, et cetera, to push this out. And I would say that that communication and outreach doesn't stop immediately after the implementation of the bylaw. It would be something done on an annual basis and reviewed. And we would take any suggestions from councillors as well as community groups in relation to what should be up on that website to help people understand what their abilities are.
I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that it's proactive rather than, this is, you can barely do these things. Obviously, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and I want to give thanks to my councillor colleagues who brought forward this so that we can have this discussion and we're moving forward. There's still some nitpicky stuff that we have to deal with, like what's under a tree, ground cover, that kind of thing, which I think we can just relax about, and let's hopefully we can work those things out. I mean, some of us, like Councillor Menard, have been breaking the rules forever, so without even knowing it. So I appreciate the fact that we're going to actually promote positive things and put it in the light of climate change and what we can all do to make good use of these spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor Luloff.
Thank you very much. Does staff have any concerns regarding the proximity of permanent or semi-permanent features in the right-of-way with regard to accessibility when it comes to city activities like snow clearing or the deployment of electric ramps from accessible vehicles?
Through the mayor, the regulations that are before you today in the report were developed in consultation with the city's accessibility office. And as well, we did present these to the Accessibility Advisory Committee and no concerns were raised.
Were the motions that amended the original staff report brought before the Accessibility Advisory Committee?
Through you, Mayor, no, they were not.
Okay. So we don't have feedback from the Accessibility Advisory Committee with the amended report, for the amended report that is before us today.
On the two particular motions that were moved at Transportation Committee, no, we do not, but we will continue to work with the AAC as well as the Accessibility Office on developing the right guidelines and messaging to Councillor Kavanaugh's point around how we can ensure that the report that's before you today as amended takes into account the accessibility concerns that you're speaking to.
Okay, understood. So just to be clear then, the possibility of the amendments, and do you have a fulsome like list of concerns from the Accessibility Advisory Committee when it comes to the use of the right of way? So I mean, we're talking about moving the little libraries. They were presented with a plan where there would be a 1 meter from the curb before you'd see one of these little libraries. Now that's changed. So we have not been able to get a response from them with regard to those changes yet.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct.
Can we have a clear legal opinion on whether or not we'd be breaching our contractual and legal obligations for utilities in the right of way if this amended motion passes?
Mayor, with respect to, just to clarify, if I understand the question would the amended motions provide, or would they cause the city to breach any of its contractual or legal obligations with respect to the right of way? I think those are largely legal. They're not contractual obligations, they're statutory obligations, but they exist for the municipality and exist for the homeowner as well. And I think it is not as much of a concern in terms of the city permitting these kinds of things. The city does in some instances permit encroachments within the right of way.
I think it is incumbent on the landowner at that point, or the property owner who's looking to install these things, to appreciate that in the event that access is required by any of the providers who require access to their infrastructure within the right of way, that there may be no obligation to return it to the state that it was in prior to access.
So we'll certainly want to make sure that, throughout this, that we make that entirely clear to residents. Chair Kitts, do we have an initial response from Ottawa Public Health on the planting of fruits and vegetables, given the use of road salt and presence of animal waste in the proximity of the roadway?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. We did have a good conversation at committee, as you know, about growing food in the row, but I'm happy to comment as we continue to get correspondence on this. So Ottawa Public Health is, of course, supportive of measures to reduce food insecurity in our city. However, when they did their review of the pros and cons of growing produce in the row, they couldn't easily find evidence for making a decision on a recommendation. So a request has been made to Public Health Ontario, which is an agency that does provide expert guidance and evidence to shape health policy. They are going to undertake a scan of other municipal positions on growing food in the row, which will then hopefully inform risks and benefits of our own bylaw. And as Councillor Brockington noted, at committee, staff did commit to coming back with a report by Q2 2024. So the conversation on food in the row is not over, but I do think that this is a prudent approach for OPH to do their due diligence to come back with an evidence-based recommendation. So for residents and councillors, you will have another opportunity to discuss this. Thank you.
Okay. I think at this point, I would prefer to have the Accessibility Advisory Committee consulted on these changes prior to us bringing it forward. Again, I mean, I think I harp on this almost every single time that we get a staff report and then make ad hoc changes to it at committee and then bring it directly to council right afterwards without doing our due diligence, is that we don't have all of the information from all of the agencies required to make this decision today. I do really appreciate Councillor Menard's direction to look at different fruit trees. I do have a service berry. It was the only one that was available, planted in my right of way through Trees and Trust. It does attract a great amount of birds, but they eat the berries before we get a chance to get out there. Usually, they're pretty quick on that. But we do get a wide variety of cardinals and robins and whatnot. It's quite lovely to have them out there. But yeah, to your point, I think that it would be important to be able to kind of switch it up and have a little bit more variety, and maybe we could get a pear tree with a partridge in it as well. All right, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I just have a question, I guess, to staff, just with respect to Councillor Brockington's direction to look at exploring planting on the right of way. I'm wondering if this is something that's possible to do, like looking at it through a permitting system or something. I've heard the concerns with access expressed by the solicitor, and I understand that, but I'm wondering if it's possible to look at it, looking at the possibilities, if there could be site visits to determine that in fact it was safe to put a planter box with food on the front lawn. And the reason I'm asking is because we're hearing today about lots of concerns about food security, the need to grow more local produce, but it seems to me in the city we really have challenges with using city lands. We have a community gardening program that hasn't seen us plant a community garden on city land since 2019. And now I understand the concerns from a public health point of view, but if we are going to be looking to see if we can put planter boxes on that right away, is it possible law that we could establish some sort of program which could ensure access or visit so we don't run into the legal challenges?
Through the mayor, the regulations that we had developed as part of this report specifically were aimed towards not having a permitting system in order to make them, as has been noted around the council table, as permissive as possible and available as possible to residents, and also to be less administratively burdensome to the city. That said, respecting what the councillors mentioned, we can incorporate that consideration as part of the direction when we go back and look at planter boxes and review that as part of the overall direction to review the planter boxes in the food.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions for staff are in regards to Councillor Brockington's direction and some follow-ups to Councillor Lowe's question. In terms of blockages for utilities in the right of way. So what's the current process when a utility provider shows up and doesn't have access to the right of way because a homeowner has put a structure in the right of way? Who does the utility provider have the right to simply remove that? Do they have to call the city to come and remove it? Does bylaw get involved? Like what's the current process for that?
Through the mayor, I would say generally that the process right now is one whereby, particularly with our more established utilities, I'm talking about Bell, Rogers, Enbridge, Hydro, et cetera, given they're well aware of their rights, given they have well-established programs, they tend to do fairly well working with the residents to try and get them to remove it. But that is not always the case. And quite often staff do have to get involved in order to mitigate these issues and try to get access for the utilities in line with what they're allowed to do.
Okay. And then when that happens, does it become a bylaw issue and then a fine is issued and then the homeowner has to pay or remove whatever structure they've put on the right of way?
Conceivably, yes.
Okay. And is there any, I'm sure this will be something that staff explores as part of the direction, but is there any estimate on the time and effort that takes from the city's perspective or delays on particular projects? Like what is the effect of that on any given project? Is there some quantifiable data that you have that you could provide council with delays that causes and associated costs?
Through the mayor, admittedly, no. What I would point you to, councillor, is to think back to, I know some councillors around the table received presentations from Bell, for example, when they're coming through with their fiber program. And there was a lot of talk about the touch points, as they called them, in relation to residents and the challenges that they had to deal with as part of their projects. Now, what I would say as well is when staff developed these regulations, they were done in consultation with the utilities. So what council sees before it today in relation to what's proposed in the report is with the concurrence of the utilities in terms of what they see as reasonable.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on that last point, you said you did this in consultation with the utilities. Did you actually get a reply from the utilities saying that this was not an issue to them, or did you just not get a response?
Through the mayor, we have a well-established utility coordination committee that all of the major utilities sit on. We meet monthly, and this was brought as part of that committee. It was presented. We had a discussion around it. I'm not going to lie and say they didn't have their concerns, but they felt that in light of what we were trying to achieve, they felt what we were doing was reasonable and they could work with us. So I guess to answer the councillor's direct question, yes, we did hear back from them.
Thank you. So, because my concern, I had one a few years ago where we had to remove a planter box because the phone line had gone down, and one of the residents on the street required 911 service and couldn't get through. So, but they had to bring a forklift in to move the planter that was illegally there at the time. So what I worry about here with this motion, we could have planters on a lot more than one house per street. I'm all for trying to grow as much food as possible locally. I'm just concerned with the right-of-way piece with planters, because the way I understand this, if food is planted in the right-of-way and somebody has to dig it up for a repair to the utilities or whatever, there'd be no requirement on their part to restore whatever was planted there. It would just be, as the rules are now, they put down some topsoil and some seed. Is that going to be the same case here?
Through the mayor, in consultation both with staff internally in relation to capital works and our own city works that take place within the right-of-way, as well as with the utilities, there is general consensus that where there is a situation where there's a residential garden, if permitted to proceed, that the restoration would be of topsoil only. It is, as I think has been mentioned, imperative that the understanding would be that residents are doing so at their own risk when coming in to do gardening within the right-of-way, but there would not be grass put back. It would be topsoil in order to provide the resident with an opportunity to then reestablish the garden.
And this is the same in the amended report as the original report? Are we talking about the same thing here?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That's my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Hughley. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, I just wanted to reconfirm the direction Councillor Brockington is giving is just simply for review of the boxes. We're not voting for boxes. That's correct, Councillor? Okay, good. So I think next year we're going to have a very much larger discussion and we'll observe what happens over time. I'm also happy where, you know, we had quite a few delegations that came out and we had a very fulsome discussion. I think it was a great discussion. But at the same time, I think Councillor Menard's correct. And when we introduced this back in the day, it was to actually add vibrancy to the community, and the narrative has been changed. I'm glad we're battling over inches. Maybe I'll amend it from 1 meter to 1.75 meters. If this is the kind of discussions that we're having on this issue, I think we're moving in the right direction. When it comes to Councillor Gower's motion, you're saying sidewalks are required, correct? On arterials, good. Because we're rehashing, you know, what we had was a good debate, and I want to make sure we're all in the same frame of mind. I also, you know, we want to run before we can walk. Let's focus on what we asked our staff, our professional staff, to do. Is they came back with a great report. They said, okay, you want to be able to do these wonderful things. It doesn't mean it's the end all. We're going to come back next year. If there's problems in certain areas, we'll have to change it or modify it. It's a living document. That being said, I'm looking at the fact that with the fruits and vegetables, I think public health will have a big challenge on their hands. And I look forward to other municipalities and what they're doing, because it's really hard to suck and blow sometimes when we're talking about a rat problem. And we want to allow for tubers and things to be planted, which if Ottawa bylaw goes to your house and there's a rat problem, they'll say, tip over your bird bath, rip out your plants. So I want to make sure we do this right and have the professional advice of our health departments that will help us inform us on our decision. And last, I want to thank members of committee. I think we had a great discussion and we always arrive at a great place. Unfortunately, I will have to dissent on item 17.1.1, which is the right-of-way component, only because I already can hear my phone ringing that a snow plows rip something out, and I want to be able to say on record that right-of-way component is of concern to me. So on that note, Mr. Mayor, thanks to members of committee and council. We worked collectively together, but more important to staff, the fact you have to hear about us arguing over inches when you put together such a terrific report. You worked so hard for us. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. So we have, if I'm not mistaken, we have a direction from Councillor Brockington, and we have a motion from Councillor Menard, motion from Councillor Gower. So any resistance to the direction? Is that okay? The direction's fine. On the motion from Councillor Menard, is that carried? And on the motion from Councillor Gower, is that carried?
Carried.
And then on the committee recommendations as amended, is that carried?
Dissent.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'll dissent on the right-of-way one as well.
Okay. So just to be clear on where that dissent is, we'll just clarify where that dissent is happening, which is from both Councillor Tierney and Councillor Hughley. And then Councillor Luloff, you're dissenting on the same thing. Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, I understand that to be item 17.1, recommendation 1.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Let's jump to item 18 on the agenda, which is the proposed 2023-2026 term of council priorities. And I'll just make a few opening remarks before I turn it over to staff. We are tabling the draft term of council priorities today, and then we will discuss and vote on them at our meeting on July the 12th. So today our discussion is just about the process and about any questions related to that. Alors aujourd'hui est une jour spéciale avec la présentation.
Today is a special day with the presentation of council priorities for 2023-2026.
This plan, as everyone knows, is the culmination of many months of hard work from everyone around the table. And I want to thank you all for your participation in the process. And I want to thank you for your dedication and your collaboration on charting our direction and establishing what I think is a clear and shared vision. I want to note that this was a new process for many of us around council, those of us who are on council for the first time, and it was also a different process from previous terms. This was a process that was led by council, supported by staff, and I think we should all be very proud of the end product that we have developed together. I believe that this set of priorities reflects what we heard during the massive consultation that we did last year as candidates for city council. We were knocking on doors, we were attending meetings in the community, we were listening to the priorities of residents. We incorporated those priorities into our platforms and into what we have brought to council so far this term. We've heard a lot of feedback from the community on where they want to see us go in the next 3.5 years. So I believe this reflects that. Le ton qui règne dans la chambre contraste fortement avec celui.
This tone is consistent with the previous council, and I would like to tell you that I'm very grateful to you all for having accepted this work in a spirit of collaboration.
There is a new level of collaboration and cooperation happening at City Hall right now. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to all of you for the efforts that you've made. And I have heard from many members of the community that they appreciate it. It's what they expected to see from us in this term of council, and they're glad to see that we are following through on it. Your collaborative efforts have not only fostered a sense of unity around council, but have also paved the way for impactful decisions that will shape the future of our city in the years to come. As a council, we looked at what we have done in previous terms. We weighed that with what we heard during the election campaign last year. We had thoughtful deliberations, we had open dialogue, and we had respectful exchanges of ideas throughout this process. And so today we have arrived at 4 strategic priorities for the 2023-26 term of council, including a city that has affordable housing and is more livable for all, a city that is more connected with reliable, safe, and accessible mobility options, a city that is green and resilient, and a city with a diversified and prosperous economy. This roadmap will serve to realize our shared vision, and it is achievable if we continue to work together. Council's priorities will inform the development of the annual draft budget estimates and inform decision-making and work plans and other efforts that we will have over the next few years. J'espère que vous êtes tous très fiers d'aujourd'hui.
I hope you are all very proud of what we've done today. I am proud. Thanks to your work, the council is giving very clear direction to encourage positive change and make Ottawa the best town where we can work, live, invest, and have fun.
City manager, to say a few words. I want to take this opportunity to thank Elizabeth Taillefer and her team for the incredible support to council through this process. Thank you for your leadership on this. And with that, I will hand it over to Wendy Stephenson. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. And good
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd really like to take a moment this morning to thank council, to thank you, Mayor Sutcliffe, and to city staff for their tremendous work and collaboration in developing the proposed 2023 to 2026 term of council priorities. And as the mayor mentioned, this year's process was very different. It was a significant change from previous terms where staff developed the priorities and put them in front of council for consideration. And the approach to identify priorities for this term of council was led by councillors, yourself, and the mayor, and supported by staff. And the end result is a very clear roadmap that provides city staff with the strategic areas of focus that council wants advanced throughout the term. And I want to emphasize that the term of council priorities are not intended to be all-encompassing. As directed by council, Other city services, programs, and strategies are going to continue to move forward under the departmental plans, and they'll be included as part of the annual budget development process. In terms of the process, following the approval of the terminal council priorities, that's going to form our 2023 to 2026 city strategic plan. And the specific initiatives and projects that are going to advance the strategic priorities are going to inform our 2024 budget directions and the development of our annual budgets thereafter. Progress updates on the term of council priorities are going to be provided to council throughout the term. And in addition, our lead departments are also going to report on very specific initiatives and their risks to their respective standing committees as required throughout the legislative process. And with that, I'd really like to express my very sincere thanks to Mayor and councillors once again for your valuable input, for your collaboration on this very critical piece of work. And I'd like to echo Mayor Sutcliffe's thanks by thanking Elizabeth Teifer and her staff. They did an incredible amount of work with all of you to support this process from start to finish. And as we look forward to the road ahead, I want to assure council that the city's leadership team and staff are very committed in terms of delivering on these priorities. I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth to walk you through the presentation this morning. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Merci, Wendy. Next slide, please. The proposed priorities for this term of council in particular, developed by mayor and councillors, are focused on describing the strategy at a high level of what council intends to achieve this term, rather than focusing on a comprehensive list of projects. Next slide, please. The priorities are focused on the strategic areas for change and improvement and provide direction to staff and help to inform decision-making. The term of council priorities include the specific objectives and results to be achieved within each of the areas of focus and include performance indicators to support performance monitoring. Next slide, please. Council directed that the 2023 to 2026 term of council priorities be adopted prior to the draft 2024 budget directions. Une fois approuvées, les priorités du mandat du Conseil 2023 à 2026.
Once approved, the 2023-2026 terms of council priorities will form the 2023-2026 city strategic plan and inform the development of the 2024 draft budget.
Also continue to deliver on council's adopted long-term plans, master plans, legislative and other council directions. And staff will provide council with updates on the progress of implementation of the 2023 to 2026 city strategic plan. Next slide, please. This graphic snapshot of the term of council priorities shows that the 4 strategic priorities mentioned by the mayor will advance the city towards these long-term destinations seen here. Ottawa residents experience a good quality of life and live in neighborhoods that are diverse, inclusive, safe, connected, accessible, and affordable. Ottawa residents benefit from a sustainable and equitable built environment that supports our efforts to address climate change. And Ottawa is economically diversified and prosperous, attracting people to Ottawa to live, work, play, invest, learn, and visit. Next slide, please. The initiatives and projects that will advance council's priorities will inform the discussions and public consultations later in the summer and fall regarding the 2024 draft budget estimates. Les priorités du mandat du Conseil visent à déterminer les secteurs hautement prioritaires.
The council's priorities for the term will inform the 24 budget directions and annual city budgets.
Following today's tabling, council will deliberate on the proposed term of council priorities at the next council meeting on July 12th. Following their adoption by council, reporting on the progress of these priorities and on the corporate risks will be provided during the term, and lead departments will report on the specific initiatives that will advance these priorities to the appropriate standing committees. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you, Wendy, as well. Are there any questions on process? Okay, we'll have a discussion and vote on the priorities at our July 12th council meeting. Thank you. Let's jump to item 20 on the agenda. There were no in-camera items today. Item 21, disposition of items approved by committees under delegated authority. Is that received? Item 22 is a motion to adopt reports. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mayor. That the report from Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. entitled Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. 2022 Annual Report, Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee Report 5, Environment and Climate Change Committee Report 5, Planning and Housing Committee Report 11, Transportation Committee Report 6, and the report from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending June 23rd, 2023, and summary of oral and written public submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of June 14th, 2023. Be received and adopted as amended.
Just a point of clarity here, should that be amended to not include the hydro item since we did not discuss it today?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. That would be that the reports be approved and adopted an amendment with the exception of the Hydro Ottawa report.
Is that carried?
Makes sense.
Thank you. Motions of which notice has previously been given. Councillor Troster, motion on private approaches on McLaren Street and Lyon Street.
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas the city is undertaking a combined sewer and water main project on McLaren Street and Lyon Street, and whereas some of the driveways within the project limits are not in full conformance with the city's zoning bylaw and private approach bylaw, and whereas many of these driveways, private approaches, have been in existence for decades, and whereas there have been no complaints with respect to non-compliant driveways, private approaches, or front yard parking in this area, and whereas staff are working on a policy to address front yard parking and reinstate driveways that have existed since September 1st, 2007, and whereas that policy is not yet in place, therefore be it resolved that council approve that in respect of the reconstruction of McLaren Street and Lyon Street, that the private approaches leading to parking on private property be reinstated as they were on September 1st, 2007. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Troster. Is the motion carried? Motion from Councillor Kavanaugh on the report on the encroachment on Nesbitt Street. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Whereas Nesbitt Street is a public right-of-way that provides access to the Ottawa River, and whereas the owners of 2 Nesbitt Street have been in discussion with city staff for an extended period of time with respect to a rock wall and other landscaping features within the public right-of-way, certain of which features have been present in the right-of-way for approximately 20 years, whereas to permit the continued presence of landscaping features, an encroachment agreement is to be required to be executed by the owners of 2 Nesbitt Street, whereas the rock wall and other landscaping features do not impede access to the Ottawa River. The neighboring community has expressed concerns, and whereas pursuant to encroachment on city roads by law, the general manager, planning, real estate and economic development, or the general manager's authorized representative has delegated authority to provide terms and execution of the encroachment agreement in according to the bylaw. And whereas given the importance of the river access, it is appropriate that this encroachment and any terms of encroachment agreements be subject to review by Transportation Committee and Council. Therefore, be it resolved that a report on the encroachment of Nesbitt Street adjacent to Nesbitt be submitted to Planning, Real Estate and Economic Development Department, to Transportation Committee and Council prior to the end of September 2023. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Is the motion carried?
Carried.
Next is a motion from Councillor Menard regarding Lansdowne 2.0 consultations. I understand your intention is to replace that with a direction.
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, and appreciate staff working collaboratively with this as well as your office on this direction. So I'll just read the direction in replacement of that motion. And I wanted to thank Councillor Brown as well for seconding that original motion. So the direction is that staff should provide an interim update memo to members of council and the public on the consultations to date on Lansdowne 2.0 as soon as is operationally feasible and no later than the end of July 2023. That the update memo include next steps to refine any options under consideration, including any proposed changes to the original Lansdowne 2.0 that are not commercially confidential. The memo should outline opportunities for the public to provide input between now and the tabling of the report, and also when additional information is available for public review, such as the traffic study, planning approvals, and the retail strategy, et cetera. That staff outline the approximate timing of the proposed Finance Committee meeting to consider Lansdowne 2.0 and opportunities for public input until such time as the report is finalized, and that staff be directed to release the report a minimum of 10 business days before the Finance Committee date to allow additional time for public review. That staff also include in the upcoming report an outline of the public input received and how it was considered and impacted the final report recommendations. And the staff be further directed to continue to actively meet with community leaders and interested councillors to inform the upcoming Lansdowne 2.0 report. Mayor, I'll again thank staff for this, and also just mention we have a survey results coming out today about Lansdowne Park, and I'll be circulating them to individual councillors for how your area responded. It's a citywide survey with 2,000 respondents, and responses were given back in every single ward and region. And so we'll circulate those to councillors later on today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. We have a few that are all of a time-sensitive nature. So first is a motion from Councillor Leeper, seconded by Councillor Troster, regarding 316, 320, 324, 328, and 332 Clifton Road demolition. On suspension of the rules, is that carried? Carried. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, colleagues. You've already once approved a waiver to demolition control. It has not been demolished yet, and the applicant needs a bit of an extension. Staff have, I believe that staff are fully supportive of this, and the owners are very close now to being able to demolish. So I'll just read that therefore be it resolved that given the unique circumstances, council waive demolition control approval and allow the owners to proceed directly to demolition of 316, 320, 324, 328, and 332 Clifton Road, making the site safe for the public.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Is the motion carried?
Carried.
Thank you, everyone. Next is a motion from Councillor Brockington, seconded by me, that is related to the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act, and there's a requirement that this be approved before the next City Council meeting. So on suspension of the rules, is that carried? Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this is more of a technical amendment as opposed to amending substance, but I do want to read it on the record. Whereas the Ontario Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act was repealed on January 1st, 2020, and replaced with the new Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act 2019, known as PAWS. And whereas several City of Ottawa regulations make reference to the OSPCA and its acts, such as the Animal Care and Control Bylaw 2003-77 as amended, as well as several categories in the licensing bylaw 2002-189 as amended, namely Schedule 8 exotic animals, entertainment events, Schedule 9 exotic animal rescue and education establishments, Schedule 29 pet shops, Schedule 31 boarding kennels, Schedule 32 in-home breeding kennels, and Schedule 33 recreational kennels. And whereas bylaw amendments of an administrative and minor nature are necessary to update those references to the applicable PAWS legislation and regulations, as well as replace references to inspectors or agents of the former OSPCA with updated references to animal welfare inspectors under PAWS, to provide authority for certain inspections and approvals by PAWS as part of the licensing process. And whereas such bylaw amendments are administrative in nature, result from changes in provincial legislation, do not require public consultation, and do not alter the intent of the bylaw, and have no new budget impacts. Therefore, be it resolved that council approve the following amendments to each of the aforementioned bylaws accordingly. 1, repeal the definition of OSPCA or any term with the same meaning. 2, add the following definition where required, quote, Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act 2019, meaning the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act 2019 as amended includes any regulation passed under it or any successor legislation. 3, repeal any reference to the Ontario Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act where it appears and replace it with a reference to the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act 2019. 4, repeal the expression inspector or agent authorized by the OSPCA under the Ontario Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, RSO 1990, CO 36 as amended, where it appears, and replace it with the expression animal welfare inspector appointed under the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act 2019. And 5, repeal the expression Ontario Regulation 6009, standards of care made under the Ontario Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, RSO 1990, CO 36 as amended, where it appears, and replace it with the expression Ontario Regulation 444/19, standards of care and administrative requirements made under the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act 2019. And finally, be it further resolved that the General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services be authorized to make any additional numbering, reference, punctuation, or other minor adjustments as necessary for the above noted amendments, and prepare the required amending bylaws for council enactment as soon as feasible. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Is the motion carried? Next is a motion from Councillor Brockington, seconded by Councillor Hill, regarding delegation of authority under the fireworks bylaw, temporary fireworks ban on suspension of the rules. Is that carried?
Carried.
Okay, Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do want to acknowledge an inquiry was made by my colleague, Councillor Bradley, I believe at our last meeting. And there's been a lot of talk. Some members of council have approached not just Bylaw, but the fire chief, Chief Hutt, particularly when there's a burn ban. And the only entity that has the authority to ban fireworks at the moment is council. And so this is really about giving our fire chief delegated authority to make those decisions in, I would say, extreme circumstances. So whereas the fireworks bylaw 2003-237 as amended regulates the sale and the setting off of fireworks within the city of Ottawa, including display fireworks and consumer fireworks. And whereas display fireworks are large outdoor recreational fireworks generally coordinated by professionals that are highly controlled and for which a permit, site inspections by fire services, and several other safety measures are required under the bylaw. And whereas consumer fireworks are small outdoor recreational fireworks generally set off by residents on their own property, which are allowed on Victoria Day and on Canada Day and the days immediately preceding and following those holidays, and which do not require a permit or site inspection, but that are subject to certain controls under the bylaw. And whereas recent wildfires across Canada, as well as in Ontario and Quebec specifically, appear to be on the increase, causing concerns for public health and safety and protection of property. And whereas the less controlled use of consumer fireworks may contribute to the starting of fires through stray embers and other accidental spread of materials that could ignite grass, shrubs, and trees, particularly during lengthy periods of dry weather conditions. Therefore, be it resolved that the fireworks bylaw number 2003-237 as amended be amended to delegate the authority to the fire chief to prohibit the setting off of consumer fireworks on a temporary basis and for a period of time to be prescribed by the fire chief for public health and safety and for the protection of property to mitigate the risks of fires based on environmental, weather, or other conditions. And just to be clear, Mayor, this is not saying, Chief, go ahead and ban fireworks right now. This is simply giving the fire chief the authority to make that call should he decide that as in the public interest to make that decision, and council is not able to meet to make that decision because we currently have that authority and we are the sole entity to have that authority at this time. So I think this is a smart move. This has come to me through Bylaw. And again, I want to acknowledge a similar question was raised by Councillor Bradley at our most recent meeting, but that's on the floor now, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Is the motion carried?
Carried.
Sure. Thank you. Notices of motion. There's a motion, notice of motion from Councillor Brockington, seconded by Councillor Menard. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this matter comes from our most recent discussion on the solid waste debate that we had at our last meeting. And I want to acknowledge that a number of residents who have certain medical conditions and generate medical waste inquired about whether they would be capped at the number of bags that they put out. So this is a notice of motion to consider this matter at our next meeting, and I thank the committee chair for seconding this, Councillor Menard. So whereas the city currently operates a special considerations program which offers eligible residents the ability to set out diapers and incontinence products for collection on the off week when garbage is not collected, and whereas a review of the program was undertaken as part of the curbside waste diversion policy project to address resident concerns about the impact that a reduced garbage item set out limit would have on unavoidable medical waste. Whereas on June 14th, 2023, Council considered the staff report and committee and council titled Curbside Waste Diversion Policy and approved motion 2003-16-06 to implement a program with a bi-weekly firm set out limit of 3 garbage bags. And whereas the original staff report had included a recommendation that the current special considerations program be expanded to also include non-hazardous medical waste, including casts, catheters, colostomy bags, disposable pads, gloves, masks, gowns, and aprons, dialysis waste, gastric and nasal tubes, IV bags and tubing, and soil dressings. Whereas expanding the special considerations program to include non-hazardous medical waste could cost up to an estimated additional $150,000, whereas no recommendations regarding this program were considered or adopted by council at our last meeting. Therefore, be it resolved that council approve the expansion of the special considerations program to include non-hazardous medical waste, and that the additional operating costs of the program be incorporated in the draft 2024 budget. That's a notice of motion, Mayor, for our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. I'm not aware of any other notices of motion. So motion to introduce bylaws. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mayor. That the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings be read and passed.
Is that carried? Okay, the confirmation bylaw. Councillor Menard.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of June 28th, 2023.
Is that carried?
Carried.
Are there any inquiries? Okay, motion to adjourn, Councillor Menard.
That the proceedings of City Council meeting of June 28th, 2023 be adjourned.
Is that carried? Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup. Bonne journée.
Good afternoon. Bonjour à tous. My name is Kendra Titley and I will be your moderator. Je m'appelle Kendra Titley et je serai l'animatrice de ce point de presse. I will now invite each agency in alphabetical order to ask their questions. You may ask one question with a follow-up. Par ordre alphabétique, j'invite maintenant chaque organisme à poser une question et une question de suivi. When asking your questions, please identify who your question is directed to, and if you are in council chambers, please use the microphone. Lorsque vous posez vos questions, veuillez indiquer à qui s'adresse votre question, et si vous êtes dans la salle du conseil, veuillez le faire au micro. We'll now start with, nous allons commencer par Liam Fox of the Canadian Press.
Liam Fox, Canadian Press. Whoops.
All right, we will go to Arthur White-Crummey at CBC Ottawa.
I have a question for the mayor. I just wanted to ask, in terms of the little library boxes and the gardening motions that were passed today, the bylaw changes to the use and care of roads bylaw, there's sort of a notion sometimes that the city has a tendency of regulating fun out of existence. I grew up here. It's kind of a narrative that you hear sometimes. Some of the regulations here have been described as quite stringent by people that have little library boxes. And I'm wondering what you would say to people that are concerned about, say, the height limits, that their little bylaw, that their little library boxes won't comply, and these kind of grassroots community efforts are going to be stifled, as a result.
First of all, I think there's a lot of evidence that suggests that many of the bylaws that we have around things like this are typically not enforced or enforced very strongly. There usually is communication with residents and an effort to resolve things without, using a heavy hand. I think there have to be rules about these kinds of things, and there are rules in other communities, municipalities as well. And I think what we're doing now is trying to make it as easy as possible for people to do these things in a way that are not disruptive, that don't get in the way, and are not affecting other residents, and to allow as much of this as possible within reason. But again, I think it's important to note that we're not going around policing these things constantly, and the idea is not to be leading to be doing anything with a heavy hand here, and it's just to provide some clarity on what should be allowed and what isn't.
And follow up on a slightly different issue, the IBE, I have a slight stutter, by the way, IBEW strike. Yeah. I just wanted to know how concerned you are about the fact that now, if there's a major weather event and we see power go down, that the city is going to be left vulnerable and residents could be left without power for days or weeks.
I have the greatest respect for Hydro Ottawa workers and for all the employees who work at Hydro Ottawa and throughout the city of Ottawa. And I'm hoping for a swift resolution to this dispute. Hydro Ottawa has plans in place to address any outages or any other issues that arise in the short term. And so I'm hoping this will be over quickly and things will be back to normal.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to Jason White at City News Ottawa.
Jason White.
Yes, we meet again.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you, sir. Yeah, so my first question would be for traffic services, Rob, or whoever would be best suited, and also Mayor Sutcliffe, interested in your thoughts. The cycling safety measures being put in place at Booth and Gladstone, where we had that near fatal collision. How concerned are you about people wanting similar measures at more locations in the city? Because I think quite a few cyclists would argue that there are quite a few dangerous spots with or without a near fatal collision. And can you tell me about the supplies, the feasibility? Does the city have the equipment to set up more barriers like that? What would this look like going forward if you got more of these sorts of requests?
I'll let the staff answer the technical things, but I would say, I supported Councillor Choster's motion right from the start. I think that has been identified as one of the most dangerous spots in the city, and there was clearly evidence that improvements needed to be made to protect safety. We'll look at everything on a case-by-case basis. We're always working, whether there's an incident or not, we're always working to make the roads and bicycle paths and sidewalks safer for our residents. That work goes on all the time. And so we're going to continue to do that and look at everything case by case.
We also have Carol Hall, who is joining us virtually. If she has anything to add.
I will add that in this particular stretch of roadway, we are taking some immediate actions. We are doing a review right now, and we are considering adding some signage, pavement markings, and signal timing changes depending on the review. Longer term actions would be taken by VDT's team in transportation planning, and perhaps Vivi might want to add some on that.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up on the paramedic staffing plan, I believe the term that was used at committee to describe current staffing was that there was a danger to public safety. And I'm wondering, Mayor and Mr. Ayotte, how much does this reduce or eliminate this risk? Is this enough? Are you satisfied with this number? Is this number more a compromise between what we would like and what the city can afford or is willing to spend? Can you shed some light on that, please?
We want to provide as many resources and emergency services as possible. And I heard throughout the election campaign last year that people wanted to see investment in emergency services, including paramedics. And so I think this is a big step forward. We want to provide as much service as we can, but we can't do that if we're not also eliminating or reducing the offload delays in our hospitals, which we view, I think quite rightly, as a healthcare issue, not a paramedic issue. The fact that our ambulances are in the parking lots at hospitals and our paramedics are in the waiting rooms rather than out serving the community, it creates a lot of delays and problems for our community. So we're working with the provincial government on that side of it, but there's no question, because the city is growing and the demand is growing and our population is aging, that we need more paramedics. And I think this will go a long way to addressing that need. Oh, it's off. Turn it on, Kim.
Yeah.
There you go.
There we go. Thank you. Not much more to add. I think our paramedic staffing model addresses two things. One is operational call volume, which has gone up quite a bit, 23% a year since last year, or from last year to the year before. With regards to public safety, our response times have decreased below the standards set by council. So that's where public safety, the risk to public safety, comes into play. I think the bigger issue for us is the ability of us to be able to separate what really belongs to the healthcare system problems from an offload delay perspective, and how the citizens of Ottawa shouldn't be really paying to fix that problem. So we were able to separate our call volume numbers with what numbers we believe should be attributed to the offload delay. So if the province does not fix the offload delay issue, then we're going to need an extra 17 paramedics per year, every year, to address that area in order to address our response times that are below standard right now. So it is a serious issue, and we are having conversations with the province, and we're hoping that they're going to step up and repair that concern for us.
Sorry to clarify, 17 on top of what's in the plan because of the offload delays?
Right. So we have 23 attributed per year. We have 23 attributed to call volume, which is based on what we need from a city perspective, based on our growth and our aging population and the number of calls that we actually get for service. However, the 17 is on top of that, which will give us a total of 40 from an operational perspective with regards to what we need to move forward to address our response time issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nous allons maintenant à Charles-Antoine Gagnon à l'E3.
Plus tôt cette semaine, le chef de police.
The police chief this week said they were short on staff. Some officers are leaving for other police forces. He needs more officers. How will you prepare the 2024 budget in order to make sure that there's enough officers at the police department? Well, this is a question for the police chief, but I know that there is an issue It's difficult to recruit enough officers, and there are some police department officers leaving, but I believe there are solutions, and the police chief and his team will be working hard to hire more officers in the future. So this is actually a question for the police chief. Yes, I know. We talked about that a few times. I know it's a concern, but I think we'll find solutions to hire more officers in the upcoming months. Do you have a follow-up? No?
Hello, for the mayor, we had the report from the Byward Market Association this morning, and obviously security and crime was a major concern. So I'm just wondering if you have comments on that, Mr. Mayor.
Comments on
the state of the market, particularly the security and leasing.
It continues to be a concern, and we're watching the situation very closely. And I speak regularly with community and social services. I speak regularly with business owners and residents in the Byward Market, with visitors to the area, and with the Ottawa Police Service. There are a number of things that are already underway to try to address some of those issues, and it's not a situation that's going to change overnight, but there's a lot of good people working on this right now. And I think over time, we are going to see the situation in the Byward Market improve. I've heard from some business owners that they're already feeling more positive about this year than they did last year, and that they're seeing a lot more activity in the Byward Market this year. Business is better than it was last year. So there are some encouraging signs, even as there are some discouraging events that happen.
And on a lighter note, have you seen the dead crow on NCC, and what do you think of it?
Somebody sent me the picture. I'm not an expert on art, so I'll withhold any comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. My apologies. We'll now go to Leah LaRocque at CTV Ottawa. My apologies for missing you earlier.
Thought you didn't have any questions today, Leah.
Nope. And it's not about a crow. So I'm actually just going to re-ask a question about Hydro, just because your mic was dipping in and out.
Sure, no problem.
Have you met with Hydro Ottawa recently to discuss the strike action? And what are your thoughts on the fact that there was some demonstrators outside today, or there was some workers outside today on a picket line?
I have the greatest respect for the people who work for Hydro Ottawa, as I do for all municipal employees, and I respect their right to demonstrate and understand the dynamics of where things have where things are right now with this dispute. The leadership of Hydro Ottawa has kept me and City Council up to date regularly this process on how the negotiations are going, and the fact that there are plans in place. So again, I just hope that there's a swift resolution to this, and that we can move forward. Oui. Alors, j'ai beaucoup de respect pour les employés.
I have a lot of respect for employees of Hydro Ottawa. I respect their right to demonstrate, and I hope that they will find a solution very soon to the problems. Plans are in place to address all the issues in the coming days.
Is there an issue with my microphone a little bit? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it feels like it's going up and down. Sure. You want to switch it out?
Thank you, Brent.
Non, pas de problème. Oui. Okay. Est-ce que c'est mieux?
Is it better now?
Okay. Now we won't be able to hear your questions.
Maintenant, on ne pourra pas suivre votre question. mais c'est moins important. Non, je blague. Question inaudible. I have a lot of respect for employees of Hydro Ottawa, and I respect their right to demonstrate. And I hope that there's going to be a solution to the strike in the hours and days ahead. I am confident that there is a plan in place at Hydro Ottawa to resolve all the issues in the coming days.
Do you want that again in English or did you get it? Sure. I have lots of respect for Hydro Ottawa employees, as I do for all employees who work in the municipal sector. I respect their right to demonstrate and to strike, and I hope this is going to be resolved very quickly. We've been kept up to date by the leadership of Hydro Ottawa over the last few days on the negotiations and on the fact that there's a plan in place to deal with any issues in the days ahead if the strike continues. So we'll watch it closely, and I hope it's resolved soon.
To follow up? Yeah, sorry. Just do that 7 more times, please.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you can update us on how the process for the search for the city manager is going, because initially the memo said that council was supposed to be informed by June 9th. So I'm just wondering if you can update us how the process is going.
So that was a rough timetable that was set out at the beginning of the process several months ago. I want to say, since I have the opportunity, that we're in exceptional hands right now. Wendy Stephenson is doing an amazing job as the interim city manager. So as we look for a permanent city manager, it's not a rushed process. We have to follow a process, and we have to bring it to a conclusion that is going to be in the best interests of the residents of Ottawa for the next several years. So we're not we want to move as quickly as possible, but the timeline is not dictating the process. It's about finding the best person for the job and moving forward. And if that takes a little bit longer, then that's okay, because ultimately it's about finding the ideal person and having that person in place going forward. So it's taking a little bit longer, but that's, I've been through a lot of different hiring processes, and sometimes they take a little bit longer than you expect, and we're still moving forward, and we should reach a conclusion, in the weeks ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Et finalement, nous allons à Frédéric Papin, Radio-Canada.
Okay.
Frédéric Papin, Radio-Canada. Mr. Mayor, I would like to hear you talk about Byward Market. I think that during the last council, you were asked a question about the police post at the Byward Market. Now we hear that the market is not sustainable if we were to recruit private security. Things happen there over the week. Things are still happening there over the weekend. How can we speed up the process? What do you think about long-term security at Byward Market? First of all, already there are more police resources at Byward. Services have a plan now for the summer. Comprehensive plans are in place, and I believe that those plans will make a difference on the market. Discussions are also underway on an operations center for police officers and also community services at Byward Market. I have spoken twice or thrice with the police chief over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Conversations and plans are being studied, and I hope we'll have a concrete plan very soon. Question for you, Mr. Hayod. On the fireworks, we had an interesting bill from Councillor Brockington to give powers to the fire chief for fireworks. What is the important role that the police chief could have with having these powers? I'm talking about private fireworks. Very well. This is really about consumer fireworks, those that you can buy in stores. These are not major fireworks like the ones organized by the federal government. Those are already regulated. We have regulations for those ones. There are conditions on permits, there are inspections by fire services. This is about private fireworks because young people and anyone could do that anywhere and anytime, usually twice a year on Canada Day, the day before and the day after for the Queen's Day in May, Victoria Day in May. But there's less control for those ones. And sometimes they spark fires. And sometimes there are problems with major fires like the ones we're seeing in Quebec and in the north. And that is disturbing. But the good news is that we've had a lot of rainfall over the past few days. And maybe there will be no need to get to that decision, but at least he will have the authority to make that decision if he feels that it's for the safety of the public.
Okay, all right. Yes, thank you very much. I think it's important to note that the fireworks authority given to the fire chief applies to commercially sold fireworks or for private citizens, those that you'd get for your family and that others for the members of the public can just use without a permit or without anything else. It doesn't apply to the federal fireworks or any other, the municipal fireworks that we have that are already regulated. There are already conditions, they require to have permits. There's already inspections being done by the fire service. And those are very well controlled. In fact, if the wind direction is too strong or in the wrong direction, they have to cancel or wait or delay. So there's already strong, stringent requirements for the larger fireworks. However, when we deal with those that are bought in the store, especially in the dry conditions we've had recently, it causes us a lot more concern with regards to, starting fires in various areas because we're not controlling where they're being set off. So they could be set off in parks, near bushes, and with the dry conditions we've had at the beginning of this season and all of the forest fires we've seen in Northern Ontario and Northern Quebec, it causes us great concern. The good news is, as you've seen in the past few days, we've received a lot of rain. So things are really greening up. And so we're hoping that the fire chief does not have to use that authority. But if he does, he's not going to be afraid to do that in the name of public safety.
Thank you. This concludes today's media availability. Ceci conclut le point de presse d'aujourd'hui. Thank you. Merci.